That's all you got. We got 2 minutes. Good morning, everybody. Hope that you're having a great snowed in day. It's not really snow, iced in day. Cold outside. I'm sad that I'm not with you guys and can't see you face to face. And so we have come up with a contraption for the day. And so I'll be online here and I will just teach. I was playing the ukulele before, but I did talk with Brian, and he suggested that I not try to lead worship with the ukulele. And so I actually don't even know if this is working, so I'm going to assume that it's working, or it'll be weird in an hour or so when I figure out that it didn't actually work. We are going to have normal services next week. All of our scheduling and planning that we had for today, we're going to shut down. And so we had some other things that were planned throughout the day that shut down. And I know we had our baby dedications planned for today. And we'll just get back with everybody. We need to look at the church calendar and kind of figure out what actually works best for everyone. Our hope was that we would be able to have service, but we decided midday yesterday that we just should, for abundance of caution, not do that. And anyway, grab your Bibles, if you would, and turn to Genesis chapter 42. Genesis chapter 42. That's where we're going to spend our time. We're actually going to finish the book. We're going to do 8 chapters today, and so we're going to finish the book this morning. When we left Joseph off at the end of last week, he was essentially the number 2 in command and administratively in command of all of the nation of Egypt, and he was responsible for managing the 7 years of plenty, of kind of regionalizing food stores around the country, and the government taxing food at the rate of about 20% and storing up those excesses during the 7 years of plenty. And the reason to do that was to prepare for the 7 years of famine. And so that story, or kind of the ending or the introduction into chapter 42 is in the end of chapter 41, starting at verse 53. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, as Joseph had said. There was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph, what he says you do." So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. And so chapter 41 ends with Joseph administering the distribution of foods. So we have the storehouse is built, the storehouse is filled, the famine starting, people starting to struggle through the famine, coming to their governmental leadership, asking for help, for some kind of solution, and Pharaoh directing their attention to Joseph. And Joseph is now administering this large social welfare program throughout the entire nation of Egypt. One of his responsibilities was to also oversee international sale of foods. And so that's going to come to play starting here in chapter 42. So chapter 42 starts with the famine, not just affecting Egypt, but also affecting the entire region. And where Joseph's family is living, there's famine as well. And they get word that there is food down in Egypt. And so Jacob decides to send all of his sons, save Benjamin, down into Egypt to purchase food. They don't know anything about Joseph. They don't know anything about what's going on. But they come to Egypt, and they come to Egypt to buy food from Egypt, from the overflow. And so they come down in chapter 42, and Joseph sees them and immediately recognizes that it's his brothers. In verse 7 of chapter 42, Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them harshly, like strangers, spoke roughly to them, and where did you come from? And they're like, from Canaan, we want to buy food. And verse 8, Joseph recognized his brothers. They didn't recognize him. And so Egyptians at the time really saw themselves much higher than other people, and they shaved, which was not normal at the time. They shaved their beards. It's not normal for people to do that. They dressed differently, and Joseph would have looked distinctly different in the 13 years since he had left home, and his position was very different. And they weren't recognizing that, but they are now the 10 brothers of the 12. Joseph's one, Benjamin's at home. So of the 10 brothers, they are now here in front of Joseph, and Joseph is speaking harshly to them. And he's kind of interrogating them. He knows who they are. They don't know who he is. And by the way, they fulfill one of the first of his dreams. They bow before him. And which is really where this whole thing started, was him telling their dreams. And so they're doing that. He remembers that. He's like, oh, that happened. And so he's talking really harshly to them. And he recognizes that his own brother, his own full blood brother, isn't there. And so he's speaking harshly to them. And they're just kind of trying to solve, like, why is this guy mad? And why is he yelling at me? And so they kind of have this discourse back and forth to each other. Joseph throws them all in jail. They spend 3 days in jail. And after they get out of jail, he sends them home, all except for one of the brothers named Simeon. And we don't exactly know why They picked Simeon. Maybe Simeon was unusually cruel to Joseph. We don't exactly know why. There's nothing in the text that tells us why he picked Simeon, but he keeps Simeon as a prisoner, and he sends the brothers home. And he sends the brothers home to go get his brother, and that they can get Simeon out of jail if they go home, get their brother, bring him back, and prove that he's actually, they're telling a true story, because he's accused them of coming as spies, and they're making up this story. And so that happens throughout chapter 41. And so Joseph does something really interesting in this, is when he loads he sells them grain, and then he instructs his servants to take all of their money and put all of their money back inside the bags of grain that they're carrying back to their families. And he puts their money back inside their sacks of grain. And so they leave, they departed, and one of the guys in verse 27 opened the sack to give some food to his animal, to his donkey, and he found his money. And he told his brother, my money's been put back, here it's in the mouth, and their hearts failed, and they turned trembling, and they're like, what is going on? What is God doing to us? So they all find out that they have their money, and they all go home and see their dad, and they tell their dad about this really bizarre and very aggressive interaction that they had with the leader of Egypt, how he accused them of spying, how they told him we weren't spies, we've got one brother that's dead, we've got one brother at home, and our dad's an old man, and we're just here to buy food, that's all we're doing, we've got money, the whole kind of the thing. And then they said, they've kept Simeon, and they're going to release Simeon if you let us bring Benjamin down. And Jacob is just like, no. Like, again, Rachel was his favorite. Benjamin is the only surviving, as he knows, the only surviving descendant of hers. And now the other brothers are, Simeon's gone, and he's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. So they decide Jacob decides that he's not going to go back. And there's this kind of interaction that Reuben has with his dad. And he's like, well, if send Benjamin, I don't bring him back and kill my boys. It's kind of really aggressive and harsh and weird. And Jacob kind of ignores that. We get to chapter 43. Jacob says, you need to go back and buy food. And Judah says to his dad, the man in verse 3 of chapter 43, Judah said to him, the man solely warned us, saying, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. And if you send your brother with us, we'll go down. But if you don't send him, we're not going to go down. And so there's this kind of back and forth and back and forth. And Judah here is, he's going to actually picture the work of Christ here. Judah says to his father, send the boy with me. This is in verse 8 of chapter 43. And we will arise and go, that we may live and not die. Both we and you, and also our little ones. And he says, I will be a pledge of safety. From my hand you will require him. If I don't bring him back to you and send him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. And he says, if we haven't delayed, we could have come back twice. And so Judah actually steps up and is mirroring Christ, or picturing Christ, in that he is willing to take on the offense of another and bear the burden of someone else. And he's saying, if we don't bring Benjamin back, I will bear the weight of that sin, which is, of course, what Jesus does for us. It's a picture of the substitutionary death of Christ. Jesus died as a substitute. Jesus takes on to himself the penalty, the weight of our sin, and he pays the punishment for our sin. Although he himself was not guilty, he bore that for us. And so he's kind of picturing that for us. So chapter 43 continues. Jacob basically is resigned to the fact that he's trapped. They're either going to starve to death or he's going to have to send Benjamin. And he's just like, well, I'm going to die anyway, so take Benjamin. And so they go in verse 14, and they go down to Egypt. And so Joseph, they come back to see Joseph. They have Benjamin with them, and they see Joseph, or Joseph sees them before they see him, and that's in verse 16. Joseph saw Benjamin with them, and he said to the steward of the house, bring the men into the house, slaughter an animal, and make a meal for them. So he kind of makes a banquet for the family, and the guys come in and they're like, hey, the last time there was some kind of a mix-up and we brought our money back, but they kind of have that conversation, and Joseph talks with them, and he offers them graciousness. He says in verse 43, peace to you, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your fathers put your treasure back in your sack. I received your money. So it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. And so they brought this great feast, and Joseph does a couple of things for his brothers. He sets them in birth order around wherever they were seating, on the floor or on the table, but he sets them in their birth order. Verse 33, they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And so here he has set all the boys in order, all his brothers, he set them in order, and they're having dinner together. And of course, Joseph can understand their speech, but they don't know that he understands their speech. So he has let on that he understands their language. He, of course, is speaking what's native to Egyptian, and they would be speaking Hebrew, and so, they would be speaking Hebrew. So he understands them. They don't know that he understands them. And so at the dinner, Joseph just overloads Benjamin with extra, like way more than anybody else got. He gives his brother way more blessing than anybody else received. And so what he's doing is creating the same condition that his father had made for him. That his father didn't make him work. His father gave him the colorful coat, which would indicate that he didn't have to work and that he was to rule over them. And he puts them, when they're there, Joseph puts them all in order. So they seem to understand that they know everything. By the way, he's brought Simeon out of jail, kind of had that little reunion. And then they're eating, and he is just overflowing praise onto Benjamin. And Benjamin is getting way more attention and way more blessing. So the dinner's done, and they sell the grain, and he sends everybody away, and he tells his servants to do a couple of things. First of all, to put all of their money back into their sacks. And then he also takes his silver chalice, his cup from the dinner table that he would have had, that they would have had access to because they enjoyed a meal at his residence or home or wherever he was. They would have had access to his fine cutlery, and he tells his servants to take his chalice and put it inside Benjamin's sack. And so they have no idea. They get on the road. They're traveling down the road. And then Joseph sends a band of soldiers after his brothers. Now, again, at this point, he knows who they are. They've bowed twice to them. So like his dream has been fulfilled. He is just trying to figure out their relationship to his brother. He knows what they did to him. They abused him emotionally. They threw him in a well. They were going to kill him. They sold him as a slave. He understands that. He understands that his privilege of birthright would normally go then to his brother. And so he would expect that they would treat his brother similarly. And he's trying to figure that out. So they're traveling, and this armed group comes and confronts them and says, hey, why have you stolen this chalice from me? And they kind of were like, we didn't steal anything from you. And like, yes, you have. Kind of this back and forth. And so they say to the soldiers in verse 10 of chapter 44, he said, let it be as you say. This is a response to them. He who is found with it, the cup, shall be my servant, and the rest of you will be innocent. Basically what they said is, if you find a cup inside our belongings, we didn't take anything. And if you find your chalice inside our belongings, that person will be your slave. I'm like, okay, fine. So they unpack all their stuff, and they go through everybody's bags, and they get to Benjamin, and they find the chalice inside Benjamin's bag. And so now Benjamin is going to be enslaved back in Egypt. From Joseph's perspective, he gets him away from the brothers. From the brothers' perspective, they have a very easy way to get him out of their lives. Like Joseph, they got him out of their lives in a really dramatic, fashion and form, and it was kind of complex. And so now they have a really easy way to say, they came after us, they put the money back, his cup was there, we have no idea, he's the second in charge. They can go home and be done with the sons of Rachel. This is their second brother. And so they have this observation, or this opportunity. And they respond really differently this time. Verse 13, then they tore their clothes. Everybody follows Benjamin back. And they go to see Joseph, and Joseph confronts them. Verse 15, what deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can indeed practice divination? Like, I know what happened. And Judah steps up and says, look, can I talk to you? Verse 16, what shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? How can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are your Lord's servants, both we and also in whose hand the cup has been found. And Joseph, like, we'll all be your slave. And Joseph's like, no, just the person that had the cup. You go back and you take care of your dad. And basically, Jacob or Judah says, I can't do that, because this is going to be the end of my father. And he tells the story to Joseph about the death of Joseph and how they lied to their father. And he kind of supports and propagates the lie, and how that his father is going to die. He says that in verse 34, how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. My dad's going to die. And so here we find Judah interceding for his brother, offering himself in place of, offering really everyone in place of Benjamin to care for their father, the genuine contrition of their hearts. So this amazing, and again, this is one of those moments which I hope in heaven we'll be able to see this somehow or watch this, because I just cannot imagine how this plays out in everybody's mind. So when Judah has this kind of one-on-one conversation, when he intercedes for his brother and he cares for Benjamin and offers his life for Benjamin's life, the Bible says, chapter 45, that Joseph can't contain himself anymore. And Joseph couldn't control himself before all who stood before him, and he cried, "Make everyone go out before me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph was made himself known to his brother. And he wept out loud, and the Egyptians heard him crying. And Joseph said to his brothers, verse 3, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" And this is one of those verses in Scripture where I think that's kind of an understatement. The end of verse 3. But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Can you believe what they're hearing? He's alive. Joseph, 13 years later, the whole story, they sold him. He's now number 2 in charge of the entire country. And so they have this beautiful back and forth, and he calls to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near, and he says, "I'm Joseph, whom you sold to Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourself, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life." Verse 7, God sent me before you. One of the most compelling and interesting thoughts, and I've talked about this a number of times with you guys, is that Joseph recognizes the hand of God in the midst of his heartache and his tragedy. Well, Joseph could very quickly and easily have identified himself as the victim. He could have and he has a position of power. He could have very quickly and very easily extracted a revenge against his brothers. Instead, we find him compassionate. We find him forgiving. And we find him recognizing that he is able to see that even the heartaches of his life have been used by God to position him exactly where God wanted him to be. That he would not be in the place that he is, with the skills that he has, doing what it is that he's doing, which is preserving the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, including his own family. Were it not for him going through the heartache and the hardship that he had gone through before. And there are, in a Christian story, there are these amazingly complex, really difficult stories. Stories of upbringing that's not okay. It's not good. It's not the way a parent should treat a child. It's not the way a parent should handle a different stress situation. It's not the way another adult should treat a child or interact or contact or touch or be around a child. That there are there are things that happen in the story of our life. And those things that happen in the story of our life can lead us into bitterness and can lead us into vengeance and lead us into unforgiveness, can lead us into living a life where we practice being a victim and live functioning as a victim in the story. Like everything that happens to me has happened badly or to my detriment. Or we can come to the realization that where you are today and the blessing that you are and the opportunity and the capacity that you have to teach people or to lead people or to love people or to parent or to be a spouse, all of the things that you do so very well, that God used the heartache of your story to bring you to that place, that you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that training. So the story goes on. Joseph goes back to his brothers. His brothers tells his brothers, go back to your dad, and sends a group of people and tells his brothers, when you go back to your dad, he tells them, don't fight, don't fall out on the way, don't get in a fight, don't squabble. He remembers his brothers and knows them pretty well, sends them home, and they go and find Jacob. And he says, look, there's going to be a terrible famine. Go get your dad, bring him back. Joseph isn't free to leave his responsibilities, so he sends his brothers to go back and get Jacob. They get Jacob, and they bring him. I can't imagine them having to tell the truth of that story to their father. I can't put all of that together, like how the father would be both incredibly overjoyed and disappointed and angry, all in the same story. But Jacob goes down to Egypt. How the nation of Israel eventually is in Egypt. They're going to be there for 4 centuries. They're going to grow into a nation. And the story of Exodus and Moses is going to come a couple of centuries later. And in the intervening time, they're going to live as kind of a independent nation in a fertile part of the delta, the Nile Delta, where the Nile overflows, and they're going to be herdsmen. They're going to take care of animals while they're there, and so they settle in the land of Goshen. And I want to kind of move through really quickly. Chapter 49 is a great read. You can read that on your own. It's Jacob blessing his sons. This is where he passes over Reuben for his inappropriate relationship with one of his stepmoms. Then he passes over Levi and Simeon because of when they murdered that whole tribe of people after the rape of their sister. And then they move to Judah, and they say that a lawgiver will come from Judah. And this is foreshadowing of David and ultimately foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. And Jacob blesses the nation. He also does something really interesting when he's about to die. Joseph brings his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and brings them in front of him. And he's to bless them and to bless the firstborn. And when he blesses the firstborn, he crosses his arms. So he actually is blessing the younger and not the older. And Joseph's like, Dad, no, figuring his dad is confused. And his dad says no. And so he blesses Ephraim with the blessing. And we're going to see Ephraim, if you study through the Old Testament, you're going to find Ephraim as a very significant name and character in this story. So Jacob dies and they bury him. And after Jacob dies, there is this one last story that I want to look at. It starts in chapter 50, and it starts in chapter 50, and it's a story of his brothers coming to go see him. And so they've embalmed him. Verse 4, they went to Pharaoh and said, I need to go back. I need to go take my father back to the land, which is kind of an important value. Take him back to the land. And so they take their entire family and all the family goes back, buries Jacob, and then they all come back into Egypt. And then verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him." So they sent a messenger to Joseph saying, "Your father," our dad, but "your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came again, they've come, and fell down before him and said, basically, "Let us live, and we will be your slaves. Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear." And this is a verse that I think should be underlined or marked or memorized and thought about often when we struggle with other people's offenses against us. Do not fear. You have nothing to fear from me. Why do you have nothing to fear from me? His first reason, for am I in the place of God? In other words, he's saying vengeance and judgment is God's job, not mine. It's not mine to extract punishment. It's not mine to wound. It's not mine to hurt. It's not mine to take power over, to having withheld forgiveness now to extract a level of revenge. That is God's job. And my friends, if we can get to the place where we release other people from our expectation of extracting payment from them, that we genuinely forgive them, and we transfer the responsibility of making the unjust just, the unbalanced balanced, the wrong right, we give that responsibility over to God. It frees us from the weight of bitterness. Now, I've met lots of Christians who are still bitter at parents, pastors, old friends, spouses, teachers, people that genuinely wronged them, and they are now much later in their life still angry, having never released the power and right and privilege of vengeance over to the ultimate judge. And that's why Joseph's crying. Like, he doesn't hold an anger and bitterness towards his brothers. He's released that. And he says, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? And as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Then he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. He said, guys, there's going to be no change. There's going to be no change. I know that what you did from an evil heart. Look, he's not sugarcoating the story. He's not saying, hey, it's okay. Like, it wasn't really that bad. No, it was bad. He's not sugarcoating that. But what he's saying is the responsibility to make a wrong right is God's, not mine. And I have matured enough in my life to see that I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have the kids that I have. I wouldn't have the spouse that I have. I wouldn't have the job that I have, the authority that I have, and the opportunity to bless people and invest in people had I not gone through that experience. And although you weren't doing this from a good heart, You weren't doing it from a gentle, kind place. You were doing it from an evil place. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. And my friends, like you can, and I've known pastors who've been in churches where the church meant so much evil against that pastor, and God used that transition to put that leader in a place of blessing where they're blessing their next church and wonderful things that are happening. I've seen homes break apart where a husband decides to just crush his wife, and God uses that in her life to move her into a different place in life where she is so much more protected and cared for and loved, where someone meant something for evil, but God meant something for good. Now, there's a trap in the story of our life. And the trap in the story of our life is to so focus on the things that have happened to us that are wrong, that we miss God owns vengeance, and God is bringing us to a good place, both to bless us and to bless other people. So, my friends, use your testimony within your sphere of influence to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Use your testimony and the story of what God has brought you through to remind people of the goodness of God. And if you ever have an opportunity to come face to face with the person that so grievously hurt you, I hope at the end of that, after that person, if they own their sinfulness, it is able to be said of you that you comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Because although they meant it for evil, God turned it for good. And God owns the responsibility of correcting a wrong and making it right. And you've long ago given that over to him. And you're actually able to love the people who hurt you as you go through the pattern that Joseph gives to us. When we get together in person next Sunday, we're going to start our stewardship campaign for our education building. We're going to spend 6 weeks kind of in the stewardship campaign, and we're going to be inviting our church members into funding this building project, both in contributing to the seed money, the initial investment in the building, as well as contributing monthly to kind of the collective body. And our goal is to sign up 335 or 235 families to commit to, over the next 3 years, a monthly commitment to fund this building project. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that next Sunday morning. We're going to launch that series called Forward. We're going to launch that series next Sunday morning. If you are a visitor and a guest at Magnolia Bible, this is not for you. This is our family taking care of family business as we try to have a greater impact in our community and disciple people who will be disciple makers. Father, thank you for the technology that allows us, even on a day where we are mostly confined to our homes, the technology that allows us to enjoy a study of your word. And Father, this is a story with lots of emotion and lots of movement inside of it. I can't imagine the shame and the guilt that the men went through. I can't imagine the confrontation they had with their father. I can't imagine Jacob having to process forgiving his sons and going to see what his other son had become, and the weight of the shame that the brothers bore their entire lives. Father, each of us have story of people who, although different circumstances, certainly have wronged us. And God, we have a tendency to ignore what you've done in the midst of that. And we have a tendency to focus our attention on the wrong and our right of vengeance. And Father, I pray that you would call us to and lead us to a place where we give vengeance over to you, that we can honestly say, am I in the place of God? Am I in your place? You're the one who makes wrongs right. And we would be able to speak kindly and compassionately, even to people who have wronged us, because we appreciate and understand forgiveness, which is based in the gospel of Jesus Christ. Father, I pray over our church family. I pray for our homes. I pray over the cold spell. I pray we wouldn't have any complications from that, and that we would be safe and stay warm over the next couple of days, and then join together in worship next Sunday morning. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, church, Lord bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. We will see you in person, regular time, next Sunday morning.